all of you know, whether you are in North America, the UK, Egypt, Honolulu, or Australia, that we all are getting a sense that we've entered into a new kind of landscape. And that landscape is affecting how we function as congregations, as denominations, and particularly as leaders, as pastors and clergy, as those leading congregation. And the question that is emerging more and more and more about this new landscape is, what do we do? How do we lead? How do we shape congregations moving forward? And so what this webinar is intended to do is to paint a picture and to offer a pathway. And over the last 18 months or so, like the rest of you, we at TMN and Forge have been listening pretty intently to a lot of the people in our networks, particularly pastors and leaders. And inside those listening conversations, I particularly have been writing a series of blog posts called Dispatches that have tried to catch the spirit of what's going on and talk about it. Over this past year, I've written 2 books, one with my colleague Mark Branson called Leadership, God's Agency and Disruptions. And the second one, which I wrote, called Joining God in the Great Unraveling, which sought to wrestle with my own question of what's going on and what's happened to the missional conversation. And through those conversations and that writing and those blogs, beginning to get a sense of what's going on and how do we move forward in this new space where we find ourselves. So this presentation this morning is really about that learning. And I'm going to spend a good bit of time shaping for you what it is that we've been learning and discovering, and then provide a good bit of time for us to do Q&A. So let's jump in and begin with the question, where is it that we find ourselves right now? Where are we? And the first thing to say is, across North America, across the UK, across Australia and other places, leaders are saying we're tired, we're bewildered, we're stressed, and we don't have a lot of bandwidth. That's the primary thing that we are hearing from leaders right now. Now, what are the reasons for this? And the reasons for this, I want to propose, is not primarily COVID. And COVID has certainly played a part. We've spent a lot of time managing how to do churches, how to manage people's stress. I understand that. But that's not the real basis for this stress, this tiredness, this exhaustion. Out of the listening that we've done, I would say that the real reason is that the institutions, the structures, and the forms of leadership within which we are operating as denominations, congregations, and leaders simply were never designed for the kind of world that we've entered, and they are simply not able to address the disruptive unraveling of our time. That is what's going on. That's the real source of the distress and the bewilderment and the exhaustion that's happening right now. One of a pastor that I know very well, in the midst of these conversations a month or so ago, was describing this distress, this hard work, it seemed. And what he said was, I never signed up for this when I began. When I first heard the call of God to ministry, this is not what I signed up for. And by this, he meant the constant managing and trying to fix congregations and ministry life. Now, where we are, from what we're hearing, is we're in what I would call a between space. We know things are not working, but we're not sure what the future needs to look like. And what I want to say is that that in-between space is okay. It's not something for us to feel bad about. It's not about the fact that we're somehow failing. It's the right place for us to be. Because an in-between space is a disruptive space where we know that where we are and where we've been is simply not working, but we don't know where to go. That is the space of generative creativity. It's the opportunity moment that we need to look at and not see as a terrible thing. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that when I say to you that the systems, the organizations, the structures, the way we do congregation and the kind of leadership that we were prepared for can no longer carry us into the shifts and changes that are going on, I am not saying that this is the end of congregations. Congregations are utterly essential, but we have to remake them. We've got to refound them if we're to have a hopeful future moving forward. And with that, this is about discovering together a different or another way of leading. Because what's exhausting us is the ways of leading in which we have been trained, and the ways of leading in which someone comes along to offer us a new program or a new idea or a new something. These are all exhausting us, and we need a different way of leading forward. And that's what I want to move to now, this question of what does this other way of leading look like? What we've done is we've listened to lots of people and to the questions, and we've got this long, long list of questions that people are asking. And out of that listing, out of those questions, what we see is that there are three primary themes that are emerging for people, particularly for leaders. And these three primary themes have to do with, number one, identity. Who are we? Number two, community. How do we belong and what does it look like to be rooted? And thirdly, decision-making. How do we make decisions together going forward? Because that's become incredibly difficult. So out of our listening then, these are the three primary questions or themes that we see both leaders and members of congregations beginning to wrestle with and begin to work on. So let's look at each of those for a few minutes to get a sense of what's involved. And I want to look at each of these, identity, community, and decision-making, through the lens of Luke 10, 1 through 12, which is one of our favorite texts. And you'll remember the text is about Jesus and his followers, his disciples, and we don't know how many of them were, coming to Galilee of the Gentiles, and Jesus taking 72, who are not named, and sending them into the towns and the villages of Galilee of the Gentiles. So that's the context. And I want to talk about each of these three themes through that lens. Let's begin with identity. What is going on in many of our churches through this COVID period, through this space of disruption, is that people are beginning to ask the question, who are we? And what are we to be about? And what does it mean to be church in the midst of all of this? There's a lot of confusion going on here. Now, what happens in Luke 10, which is really about this question of identity in Galilee of the Gentiles, is that Jesus sends the 70 or 72 out, and they are to go into these towns and villages, and they carry with them a word. And the word that they bring to the people of these towns is shalom, peace, a deep and profound Old Testament word rooted particularly in Isaiah. Because you see, the people of Galilee of the Gentiles are filled with anxiety. And their anxiety is what's happened. The story that we've lived in, the story of being at the center of God's life and God's hope seems to have been shattered. Wherever we look, Rome is present. And the story of being God's people seems to have been torn up. We're confused. Where are we? And so when these 72 go and speak the word of shalom in these towns and villages, that was revolutionary language to people who had lost the sense of who they were. Because you see, the primary narrative of those places was Rome's pax, or peace. And what Jesus is saying through the 72 is that Rome's pax wasn't the real story of what's going on. The real story of what's going on is shalom, which is shorthand for God's kingdom is right here amongst you in these places where you live. Now that is about identity. What is happening here is that Jesus, through the 70, is reminding these people about the core nature of who they are. They are people shaped by God's kingdom, by God's presence. And what does that mean? What that means is these 72 were not focused on fixing and managing the situation in Galilee of the Gentiles. They didn't go in there with new plans and new strategies and new outcomes for, quote, coming out of COVID, or for finding the formula for a new future. That was not the work that they were doing. The work that they were doing was work of identity, of reinviting these people in Galilee of the Gentiles to see and embrace their very identity as those who are rooted in what God is doing and what God is about, because that was what been lost. And I think in our time, identity can no longer be about denominational brand or fixing associational churches or new kinds of churches. It cannot be about our socio-political positions that we align with. Our identity needs to come from our conviction that we are the people of God. We are shaped by God's presence, and we are the bearers of God's presence here. And that's precisely what's been lost. And the role of leadership in that isn't primarily managing and fixing. The role of leadership here is about how we go about forming a people who incarnates and bring the shalom of God. Because that's where a renewed hope and confidence is going to be discovered. It is in the fact that God is at work in the very places where we dwell. So that's what identity is about. The second piece is about community. Now, this is a really interesting one. What people across all kinds of congregations are telling us as we listen is that they're wondering all over again, what kind of community were our churches? How deep did the roots go? What did it really mean to belong? Because it doesn't look right now that we had that one really well in place. What, therefore, is community? And how does community really get formed? And what I want to say about community and the call is going to be 180 degrees different from most of our common understandings of community. Because when we think about community, we think about the inside life of our congregations and the sense that if we get that one right, everything else will be right. But you see, here, particularly in Luke 10, the place where community is discovered is not in the places where we've expected or we put all our energies. See what happens in Luke 10. What is it that Jesus says to them? Jesus says, go. Go into your neighborhoods. Go into your communities. The community doesn't get formed by these disciples shaping a holy huddle around Jesus. Jesus sends them to go and to participate in the homes and the life and the work of the people in their neighborhoods. That is where we will begin to discover again what it means to be the community of God's people. That is the call. And therefore, this is about how we learn as God's people to pay attention to what's happening to the people in our community and where we are. And this means a very different kind of role for leaders, a new kind of role for leaders. And there's two words that I use. And those words are, first, we become midwives. And secondly, we become detectives of divinity. And what they mean is that this role is that we have to gently discover the ways of inviting our people to join with and be with the people in the communities where they live. That's the route to discerning and discovering how community gets formed in this radically changed space. And in those radically changed spaces of being with and being for the people in our community, what we are learning to do is to listen and attend to the stories of people. In Luke 10, it's about sitting around the table as a host rather than a guest. I'm sorry, as a guest rather than a host, and working with. And so when we are joining with and listening with, then as a leader, we become midwives of helping our people express and describe what they're hearing, what they're learning, what they're discovering. And as midwives, we become detectives of divinity by helping our people ask the question, what's God up to here? What's God at work? And that's what produces hope and confidence and energy. And that's what builds community. So identity and community. The third area that's critical is how we make decisions, decision making. Now, this one is a little hidden in Luke 10, but it's implicated because you see, in Luke 10, one of the critical things these 72 are invited to do is learn how, as I've said, sit at the table and be with and join with and be present with the people in the communities where they are. And note, they're told to leave their baggage behind. So they don't take their answers, their solutions, they go and join with a round table. Now, in Jewish culture, being around the table is to engage in the kind of conversation and engagement that's called midrash. And midrash is where you're wrestling with what's going on in the midst of the day, and you're talking back and forth, and in the midst of it, you're hearing and describing what God is doing. And it's out of that being around the table, out of that being together and listening and discerning and talking, that you begin to discover together the common actions and the ways of making decisions together, which is a radically different way of decision-making from let's create a strategic plan. Let's create a new process design for where we're going. This is the way we make decision-making around the table using midrash, out of which come action. And you do that by inviting people around the table to begin speaking out the stories that are inside them and are among them. And in speaking out those stories, you are listening to the kinds of actions that lay pregnant around the table and amongst people. So you see, the role of leadership in decision-making isn't bringing decisions and asking people to vote on them. It's not coming up with plans and metrics for where you're going to go. It's not sitting and saying, I've got the code to 21st century ministry. It's hosting. It's creating tables. It's pointing to what's going on in the engagements and the conversations. It's naming. It's inviting people to tentatively say, hey, here are the things that we want to do. And above all else, the role of leadership is to continually be celebrating what God is doing amongst the people as this is going on, because that's what tables are for. Dialogue, conversation, engagement, but most of all, celebration. And so what we're discovering is 3 fundamental themes of identity, community, and decision-making. But we're also recognizing that the ways these 3 themes have been carried out in existing congregations and under current leadership models simply cannot carry the freight. And that's why people are exhausted. And therefore, what we are doing is naming some different, fresh ways of how we lead in this new space. And so I want to talk briefly about the kind of next steps that we are beginning to develop. These next steps function in this way. Over the next numbers of months, we are introducing, for anybody that wants to join us, a series of workshops. The purpose of these workshops is to dig deeper into each of these themes. And so later this month, the first workshop is how do we embrace this kind of identity that I'm describing? How as leaders do we explore the ways of shaping a new kind of hope and expectation in God out of this understanding of identity? And it's the emphasis on the how and the practicality of it. And then in October, the second workshop will dig deeper by exploring how do we form this kind of community, not the holy huddle, but out there amongst God's people. And then in November, how do we do this kind of deciding? What's involved in it, this kind of decision making, and how do we lead well in doing that? So these 3 workshops over the next number of months will dig deeper into what I've described, but they are all leading to something that we're very, very excited about, which is what we're calling, and it's probably not the most elegant time, the leadership project. So that starting in January of this next year, we're forming small cohorts of leaders like yourselves who are going to come together over a period of time in a leadership project experience, looking at these 3 areas and how to work them out concretely and practically in the place where I lead and minister. So the leadership project is not about big ideas like we've just done. The leadership project is where you bring the reality of what you're working with, and with a group of others, we begin to work on that together. So keep posted for the leadership project. There'll be more information about it coming along, but that's where we're going with all of this. So I'm going to stop and thank you for your patience and your listening. And we're going to now go into a time of question and answer together, where you have a chance to kind of interact and ask your questions.